All parties are now in the courtroom, as well as the families. We still haven't been told why, but everyone has been called back. And now we do have the judge, so let's listen in.
I appreciate you all getting back here. During the luncheon break, I received word from a court officer that the jury had knocked on the door, indicating that they had a verdict. But before I could even summons everybody into court, shortly thereafter, they knocked again and said they didn't have a verdict. So I asked the court officer to tell them to put that verdict slip in an envelope and seal it, and to give it to us. Paul, do you have it? Thank you. I haven't seen this. It's been sealed. I'm now going to seal it in the legal sense. So this is sealed. No one will have access to it. It will be preserved and made part of this record. I'm going to ask it to be marked for identification with the word jury, Chrissy, just to keep it separate and apart from everything else. So it's marked for ID with the word jury. All right. So we do not have a verdict because, as we all know, there is no verdict until it is announced and recorded in open court. So we are still awaiting a verdict. Because it took a while to pull this together, I would ask that everybody remain in the building until the end of the day. So we'll see everybody later.
Thank you.
Wow. If you didn't think this case could get more strange, it just did moments ago.
Yeah, that is not what any of us expected as we all watched in real time. Judge Cannoni coming back to say the jury initially indicated they had a verdict. And then they turned around and said, wait, we do not have a verdict. Well, my goodness.
And the way it was described there, let's bring Cheryl Fiandaca back in, because at first she said they knocked on the door during lunch and said, we have a verdict, right? And then came back and knocked again and said, we don't have a verdict. But she had an actual envelope with paperwork in it. So explain that.
So it seems like, to me, that she has accepted something that they have given her. It might be a partial verdict, which may be saying that they have reached a verdict on maybe one or two of the counts, and that's what they gave, but they don't have a verdict in the case of all of the charges.
Interesting.
That's what it appears to be. Now, I think it's pretty complicated because, like you said, first she said they had a verdict, then they didn't have a verdict, then she said she's sealing the verdict in an envelope, and obviously verdicts are not accepted and published until they are read in court, and that's what she was talking about. And, one of the things about this case that's so interesting is if she is found guilty on any of these charges, the defense has the opportunity to what's called poll the jury. So once they hand in their verdict, each member of the jury, the clerk would ask them, is this your verdict? And they each have to answer yes or no.
And why do they do that?
Well, sometimes if people feel like maybe folks were coerced to agree, or there was some kind of confusion, in this case there's plenty of it, and the defense wants to be sure that everyone really did have it, that it was a unanimous verdict. All verdicts have to be, in criminal cases, unanimous. So that's a way to make sure that people, if they were in the jury room and felt coerced, now they're in open court and they're saying, I really didn't agree to that.
Interesting.
So it's fascinating. It's just quite a story. I mean, it's twists and turns everywhere you look. So this is par for the course from what we've seen, actually.
I mean, and just knowing what we know, knowing about their questions yesterday, it makes you wonder, what is it that the jury either still has a question about or cannot agree on at this point?
And maybe, if we're playing the guessing game, let's just go all in on it. Right. Because she has an envelope with a partial, let's say that she has a partial verdict in her hand, it's at least possible that someone said at the last minute, you know what, I'm not ready to give up and say that we're stuck on the third one. Let's go back in and give it another run. Let's go back and give it another couple of hours, right? possible, right?
It's all possible. I mean, we really don't know what's going on in there. And, what's interesting, too, is that, the fact that they knock on the door so the court officers don't go in the room, because no one's supposed to enter the room during deliberations. So when they do have a verdict, that's how they are supposed to communicate. And so in this particular case, that could very well have been where they said, okay, we all came to a decision. And then someone said, wait a minute, I'm not convinced that that's what I want to do. And so they might be going over it again. I mean, it's a tough case. As we've talked about, this story's been quite polarizing everywhere. And, I think you pointed out yesterday, David, that even folks that don't believe one side or the other still say, I don't know. I don't know what happened here. So.
Well, we rushed on the air in case you missed it. The big headline right now, and a pretty shocking headline, is that Judge Beverly Cannoni just came back after the lunch break and announced that there was a verdict, that the jury knocked on the courtroom door and said, we have a verdict. And then shortly after that, at the end of lunch break, they came back and knocked again and said, we don't have a verdict. So she has this envelope that she said she would have sealed. We don't know what's in the envelope. We don't know if it's a partial verdict. We don't know what's in there, but someone actually filled out some kind of form. So they got that far in the proceedings. But where we go from here is now very unclear.
And what we heard Cheryl say, as well as Judge Cannoni, she has the envelope, and that may seem like progress, but there's no verdict until it is read aloud in court and therefore becomes official. So even with that envelope, we can see, we can wonder, but until it is said and decided in court, we are still exactly where we were before lunch.
And you said earlier, and this was important, that with all the confusion about the verdict slip in the first trial, and then that seemed to be the case yesterday when we saw the jurors' questions, that late yesterday afternoon, the judge, along with the defense and prosecution, gave them an amended verdict slip for the manslaughter charge. And in that, they all seem to think that it made it a little bit more clear. Under each subcharge, in bold, it basically said, if you pick this, you can sign off, and that's the end of things. So while we all consider the fact that the jurors are just completely confused at this point, we should give them the benefit of the doubt. These are smart individuals who have been in on this for 8 weeks. Maybe they're not confused at all about the process, but instead confused about what they want their decision to be.
That could very well be. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about the verdict slip, and, we took a look at this, and I think several times yesterday the judge mentioned, on the first page, and we were all confused because we were like, what do you mean the first page? There's no first page. But on this new verdict slip, there is a first page because they made it two sides. So, all of the instructions, and at one point she had to go over another instruction because she couldn't remember exactly what she said, and the defense thought she said something different from what she thought she said. So that was brought out again to the jury. But, all of this legal business in terms of, the verdict slips and the elements of the charge, these are lay people. They do other things for jobs. They're not lawyers. So, going through all of this is not quite as easy as it seems.
And I did, when there's deliberations that are ongoing and you're covering a trial like this, sometimes you go back and try to do a little more research. And so I went backwards and I looked back at some of the more famous cases here in Massachusetts, one of them, Louise Woodward trial. And post-trial, there was a lot of talk about confusion with the verdict slip. So we should point out that the verdict slip confusion can be real in cases that there are a lot of moving parts.
And I think what is important to note is that on both sides, the judge and the jury both seem to be doing their very best to take care with the final decision. The judge wants to make sure she is of no influence at all. We've heard her say, you all have the evidence. Everything you've seen laid out for you, like, I can't help you do this. I gave you the instructions, I've amended the slip, like the judge has made it very clear, I've done all that I can. And then on the side of the jury, it seems as though they are trying to be very careful, thoughtful, deliberate, and intentional about what this final decision is going to be, which then allows us to come to you while we wait for them to figure out thoughtfully, carefully, deliberately, what that final decision is that they're all going to agree on.
We can bring in our legal analyst for this retrial, Catherine Loftus. Catherine, you thought you had heard it all and seen it all, and now this. Tell us your thoughts on this idea of the jury coming back, knocking on the door, we have a verdict, and then a short time later, knocking on the door again and saying we don't have a verdict.
Well, it seems like with this case, we should expect the unexpected. This is very unusual. I've never seen anything like it. The fact that, they took the steps to knock on the door, say we have a verdict. Clearly, they filled out some sort of verdict slip. We don't know if it was, in its entirety on one and not others, but enough that she took the actual slip, sealed it, and kept it with her. I mean, what my gut reaction feels is that sounds like they came to a verdict and maybe quite literally at the very last moment, somebody said, wait, I'm not so sure, and we've been in deliberations for days at this point. So I think the indication is that, someone might have been persuaded or, towards one side or the other, and then sort of their gut kicked in and felt like, is this the decision I really want to make? Because other than that, I'm not sure what the explanation would be, but very interesting, not the norm at all.
Catherine, let me follow up on that because Christina Rex from the courtroom writes, in that manila envelope is a verdict slip from the jury that is sealed and has not been viewed by anyone, including the judge. We don't know if it's all three indictments or what. It's sealed now and no one has access. So the fact that those documents were actually turned over to the judge, okay, and the judge took them, does that not lead you to believe that they feel they've made their decisions on those two far enough that they're allowing the judge to take it, and then they went back on the third one? Or is it logistically they already gave over the forms and they just didn't take them back?
It's really hard to know. I mean, it could be either. It could be that they've made a decision on some of the charges, but not all of them. It could be that they made a decision on all three of the charges, whether it's count number 2 or one of the lesser includeds, and then handed them over. And once it was given to the court officer, changed their mind. And there's all these sort of procedural issues that if the paperwork was handed over to the court officer, after they changed their mind, maybe it was 30 seconds, maybe it was a minute, they still have the obligation, obviously, to take that verdict, maintain it as part of the court record. So it's really speculation at this point as to whether they're decided as to some or whether they were decided as to, 2 and not on 1. But we'll see. Maybe we'll get one by the end of the day. So
you're saying, and the judge said this, I guess, until it's actually read in court, it's not a done deal.
Right. It's not, the verdict has to be read in open court. Right now it's sealed until they finish their deliberations. They're still deliberating, so that's why it's being held.
And it feels like, back to the point of there being some exhaustion in the courtroom, Cannoni also pointed out that, all right, everybody's got to stay in this courthouse until we are officially done for the day, which also kind of stuck out to me because it's like, it kind of felt like, all right, everyone, let's get it together. I've amended the slip. I've given you as much instruction as I can, and now we're not leaving until we either wrap for the day or have a verdict.
Yeah, she didn't, I don't think, and maybe someone can correct me here, I don't think she let everyone go and come back later.
Right. No, she said stay in the courthouse.
Yeah. So there's at least the possibility that they said, we don't have a verdict, give us just a little while because we want to talk over a few things, right?
Anything is possible in this case, right? I mean, at this point, you have to believe that someone or maybe more than one person said, wait a minute, I want to talk about this a little more. I want to think about it a little more before we finish our deliberations. And so that's what's happening. I mean, whether that takes the rest of today and come back on Friday, or whether they in the next 15 minutes, they said, okay, I feel okay about the decision. It's hard to say. We're still reading the tea leaves.
Yes,
We've read a lot of tea leaves over the past 24 hours.
And then we want to get out to WBZ's Penny Commit, who has been a part of our coverage of this trial here. Penny, tell us, what is the mood like out there? We know that there have been supporters there every day, and now it feels like we are so close to a verdict and we still don't have one.
The best way to describe it is deflated. I know it's hard to see because it is just so incredibly packed out here. People are lined up for blocks, but everyone was kind of watching on their cell phone. Truly, you could see the top of everyone's heads. Everyone was watching on their cell phone. And then when the judge said there was no verdict, you could almost feel like a deflation in the crowd. Like there was a sense of energy. People had flags in the air. And then everything kind of subsided. I went up to some of the Karen Reed supporters that I've been out here every day with for weeks now. I asked them how they're feeling. They had no words for me, which is pretty rare from them. All they said was too many emotions to describe. So this crowd is feeling very deflated. I think people were really hopeful for a verdict. They've been hopeful since yesterday when the jury asked those 3 questions. So I think they keep getting their hopes up and then getting let down. A big crowd still out here, and they're hoping to get something by the end of the day. Guys.